Well, welcome everyone to the Art of Paying Attention, where paying attention is our proper and endless work. This is your host, Ryan J. Pelton. I am so glad that you are here, however you are finding us. Hey, just a reminder, we are not only on audio, but we're also on video. So if you go to my YouTube channel, Ryan J. Pelton, you will find video over there. Someone said, hey, that's what the cool kids are doing, so you need to get on the video. So we're doing that. Not only do we have the podcast, we also have some video content, starting to push out some more of that stuff. Hopefully it'll serve you well, whatever you're making, whatever you're paying attention to, whatever you're dreaming about. Also, just a shameless plug up front here before we introduce our guest is, hey, if you are starting a project or you are feeling stuck, maybe you're feeling stuck in a creative project, maybe you're feeling stuck in your business, maybe you're feeling spiritually stuck. I offer some coaching solutions, programs, if you will. If you go to my website, I'll put that all in the show notes, ryanjpelton.com/coaching, or might be mentoring, I forget, but I'll put it in the show notes. And if you feel like you just need someone to talk to, try to figure out next steps. I've had a lot of experience in starting nonprofits, starting businesses, helping people get spiritually unstuck, whatever that may look like for you. Go check that out. So just want you to know that is there for you if that would serve you in any way, shape, or form. But today we have a fantastic guest, Dr. Giles, and Dr. Giles is a fantastic human who is helping people get free of addictions. And so if you know anyone that's struggled with addictions of different shapes and kinds, if you are a person who struggles with addictions, I grew up with a mother who struggled with alcohol, and this is going to be a fantastic conversation. And he really gets into the heart of addiction and his own story and his own background, how he started this practice. And I think you're going to love it. And so I love guests like this that are really doing God's work, really fighting the good fight in so many powerful ways. And this is one of them. And so here is my conversation with Dr. Giles. Well, Dr. Jason, so glad to have you on the show, and always ask our guests, what are you paying attention to these days?
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for having me on your show. I appreciate it. I'm paying attention to a couple of things. This morning I paid attention to my son. He is he's a new economist. He just completed his postgraduate training at George Washington University a few months ago, and he got his first job a little while ago in a healthcare fraud detection company. He's a data analytics specialist, and I'm paying attention to what he is interested in, what he finds exciting. And I had a lovely conversation with him this morning where he was telling me about his work, and it's clear that he has developed some confidence and some excitement about what he's doing. I mean, that's what you want for your kids, is, of course, for them to feel like they can make their way in the world, but also that what they're doing is meaningful. He's looking for healthcare fraud, which is awesome. I think that's great. Find that, get that out of the system. But so I'm paying attention to him. I'm paying attention to his growth and his development, and it's that stage of life. He's 23, where he's not a kid anymore, so I can't influence him directly, but I can influence him by paying attention. By listening to him, by giving him an audience, by giving him my attention, my support. So that's one thing I'm paying attention to today. The other thing I'm paying attention to is the mechanics of delivering care. So we were chatting a little bit before we started. My specialty is addiction medicine. I have a telemedicine company, and we take care of, at any one time, about 600 patients who are going through alcohol and drug detox. And the company has grown, and our services have gotten more complex also, but maintaining the highest standards, and more than that, promulgating the standards, trying to influence the rest of how the country takes care of this problem. That I'm paying attention to, because it's a really hard problem. There's a lot of inertia. There's a lot of, this is not how we do it here, that sort of stuff. You saw me in a phone call right before we started, and that had to do with this particular problem, right? It's a merging of cultures, and listen, the bottom line on people with substance use disorder is they're paying attention to the wrong thing, right? They're overweighting their feelings. They're paying attention to the present moment much more than paying attention to where their actions are going to take them. And that's how they wind up, God willing, they wind up in treatment, getting help. There are other possible outcomes for people whose attention gets so distracted. Part of what we do is we construct a way for them to pay attention to the things that matter. So they are paying attention to their health when they arrive. They pay attention to their withdrawal symptoms. They pay attention soon to how to manage their feelings without chemicals. I don't know. Most of us don't remember learning to walk. I don't remember learning to walk. I remember learning to ride a bicycle and how hard that was.
Yep.
Now it's not hard, but in many cases, the people that we look after, it's almost like that. They're learning for the first time to express their feelings, to not be overwhelmed by them, and it's a bit like learning a new system. And they're awkward and they're embarrassed and they fall and they get it wrong. And so, how we convey support and love and attention and empathy at scale, right? At scale. That's what I'm paying attention to. How we do that. It's a good question. Great question, actually.
Well, no, I love that because I think it fits well with our show. And, we always talk about paying attention to what matters most. And obviously, someone that's struggling with addictions, struggling with their negative feelings, things out of control, you have to kind of re-engage to kind of figure out, how do I work through this? How do I live? I love that. We'll get into that a little bit more, but I love your story. I was reading up on a little bit of your story, and you had your own struggles with addiction. So how did you get into this work?
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as paying attention goes, I'm exhibit A on what happens when you lose track of what's important. And so how I get into this field, my background is I'm an anesthesiologist. So my specialty was cardiac anesthesia, which is not just hearts and heart surgery, but all of the big, heavy duty, scary cases, big trauma, transplant surgery, brain surgery, those kinds of heavy duty, bloody, multi-hour cases. And that's the stuff that I loved. I love the intensity of it. I love the teamwork. You had the best surgeons in the hospital doing these cases, and not just surgeons, perfusionists and nurses and circulators, and the blood banks always involved in these big cases. So in terms of attention, we use that as the denominator for our conversation today. Attention. That kind of work, if you've ever done a job like that, that's first responder work when you're on shift, or military, right? If you're mobilizing or in combat, those kinds of things are completely over. They take all of your attention. There's no time. Sports at the highest levels, there's no time to think about anything else. And I only figured out later that part of the activity, part of all the doing, was a way to manage my internal life, my thoughts about myself, my understanding of my place in the world. I was in my 20s when I was doing training in this. And so as long as I was super busy all the time, I didn't think about myself. I didn't think about how I didn't feel like I was good enough, or that I didn't fit, or that I didn't belong, or worse, that other people had the things that let them fit and belong. They had the ingredients or the the programming or the chip or the DNA strands that let them belong, and I felt like I must be missing those things. All of that's normal. I learned later that it's normal to feel that way, and that high performing and high achieving people, it's basically universal that they feel that way. Where I got into trouble is when I thought I can manage these feelings. And so I tried to manage them with work and activity, and that worked to a certain extent, but then can't turn off your head when you're not in the OR. So I looked for a medical or pharmacological solution to just get a break. I was looking for an hour of freedom from this mind. They call it the monkey mind, where it was just, hey, what about this and what about that? And pretty soon, it was constant. And so that adventure to try to turn off my thoughts took me on a journey of self-discovery, not the one I intended. I intended to be in control. And what I learned is that peace, my thoughts, I'm actually not in control of. What I'm in control of is my actions. What I'm in control of is what I do. But as obvious as that sounds right now, sitting in the studio talking to you years later, it was not clear at the time. So I got wrapped up in substance use. And fortunately, because it doesn't always go this way, fortunately, I came to the attention of my department chairman, who said, there's a large amount of fentanyl that we can't account for in the hospital. We're not saying that you took it, but if it's all back in the pharmacy by 6 o'clock, then we'll consider the matter closed. And he knew that there was no way that I could get it back in the pharmacy. And so I said, can I talk to you? He said, I was hoping that you would say that. And then I had an opportunity to be honest about how I felt, what I'd been doing, the abyss that I was staring down, because there wasn't much left. something bad was going to happen and soon. And I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. And so I left into a program of recovery, not because I'm heroic or had any, great visions, but because I had no better idea. I knew I wanted to live, but that's as far as my insight got. And so I just did what I was told.
Wow.
And I was encouraged to find a higher power. We talked about that a little bit before the call started. And I was a scientist, so I didn't have much use for that. The world's explainable if we just dig deep enough and find the right equation. That's how I used to think. I recognized in the process of this inquiry that I was mistaken about that. That I was just mistaken. I was mistaken about needing a substance to manage my feelings. And when that brick came out of the wall, then the rest of it fell down. Because if I was mistaken, then maybe I was mistaken about a lot of things. Maybe I was mistaken about there not being a God. Maybe I was mistaken about my role on planet Earth. And I was even mistaken about all the stuff that happened. I thought that was unfortunate and bad luck, and it was not my fault. And if I hadn't been caught, I was still hanging on to a lot of those ideas. But I recognize that everything is here for a reason, that all the stuff that happened was for a purpose. Now that's very clear, right? 20 years, 25 years now down the road, it's very clear why I went through that. But at the time, I didn't know what God had in store for me. I didn't know that I was going to have a different career. I didn't know that I was going to be able to leave this behind once and for all. I didn't know what was up ahead. I had an overwhelming sense of relief and love and forgiveness in the process of going to this. And I got super excited about sharing that. I want everyone to have that experience, not to go through the dark parts, but I think everybody goes through dark parts. I don't think there's a way around that, but for them to get to the joy and to the gratitude and to the grace that is available if you just turn toward it and stop running. So I stopped running, turned toward it, and started doing the things. And then I made a really ridiculous low risk bet. I thought it was very low risk. I said to whoever, whatever this entity, right, the higher power that was beginning to get to know. I said, well, look, if this works, and by that I mean this recovery stuff about connecting with fellows and maintaining sobriety and helping others. I said, if this works, I'll keep doing it, which is a very small-minded way of thinking, right? If this works, I'll keep doing it. Well, here we are, right? Here we are. 25 years later, it still works. I'm still engaged in it. It still continues to pay compounded dividends in a way couldn't have possibly imagined. And now, our company helps thousands of people every year get sober. I've been fortunate enough to be arm side for many tens of thousands of people getting this message and getting it. And so you want to talk about how all that stuff that I used to feel embarrassed about and used to be the worst part of my life is now the part that I'm talking on a podcast about.
Mhm.
That's transformation.
Mhm.
That's Saul of Tarsus experience. So yeah, that's in a very big nutshell. That's how you and I wound up talking.
So let's talk a little bit kind of in that in between. So, obviously you get caught, the addictions are
Yep.
serious, you're an anesthesiologist. What was kind of obviously you needed to get help. You got that help, but like how long did you continue to do the work you were doing in the past? And then kind of when was the transition into the work you're doing now?
I went back, so I went and got help. I put the brakes on. I started living my life differently. I got involved in a program to help keep an eye on me, which is great. I'm grateful for that. Francine and Pam, you know who we are, and so that was awesome. My chairman said, if you get yourself sorted out, basically, it's a shorthand way of saying it, then we love you and you're welcome back here. I didn't really believe that because it seemed dangerous and like they were taking a big risk, and I suppose they were. But by the time I came back a couple of years later, I was a different person, and it's not the place. You don't have to get drunk in a bar just because you're in one. And I certainly got back to the real reason that I had done this in the first place, which was I love medicine and I love being useful to my fellows in the hospital I was. I continued that for a few years. I worked as a cardiac anesthesiologist, doing all this stuff, doing all my training. And then in 2005, somebody I knew who had gone through problems with his family, and his family member had been through all the recovery and so forth. And I had been talking to him and kind of advising him along the way while all that stuff happened. He got into the treatment world. He wanted to stay close to it, and he wanted to keep his son close to it. And he said, will you come help us? Does he know how to do this? And I thought, well, I'll try it because I really liked that part of it's getting more popular. It has gotten in the 20 years since I've been doing it, but it was then it was not an exciting part of medicine, not like doing heart transplants. It wasn't something that at a party, when you said, "Oh yeah, I'm an addiction doctor," people usually, if they've got a glass of wine, they're like, "Well, I mean, you don't think I?" I'm like, "No, it's okay. I'm just telling you what I do for a job." People get self-conscious, and people didn't really know what that was. This is before celebrity rehab, and this is before all the high-speed chases of Britney Spears through Los Angeles, and
Huh.
people didn't understand all this stuff back then. But for me, that "Well, let's try it for 6 months" thing turned into, I don't know, it was if the fish found the water. I was made for this job, and so I went back, I did the thing, I got my boards in anesthesia. I feel like I satisfied that duty to complete the training, and also to give back to the field, as it were. And then I did a fellowship in pain medicine. That kept me connected to that world for a long time. I haven't done anesthesia in a very long time, but that's all left behind. And now for the last 2 decades, it's been just taking care of patients. It's been taking care of patients with their alcohol and other substance use disorder. You know, my best friend is a heart surgeon, and we talk about the OR sometimes. We talk about the cases, and I miss it. Some part of me misses it because it's such a special place. It's like a temple almost, being in the tile temple, taking care of folks in that environment. But I don't regret leaving it. I don't regret leaving it behind. This is what I do.
Yeah, I love your story. And my mother was actually an alcoholic and still is, but challenged with that and watching that as a child, but also as an adult. And, always the question, and even in my own life, walking with people that have struggled. And what are some things that you kind of learned from your own story, and obviously, helping thousands of people at this point. We talked off air a little bit about, compassion and not being judgmental towards people. It doesn't seem to be an effective means of helping people if we're, just screaming, yelling at them, get your act together, just do the thing, or, stop doing whatever you're doing. But how does because I find your story compelling as far as environment. I mean, obviously, successful guy, you're working in a hospital. It seems like things are going well, but obviously, there's this feeling of I'm not worthy, I'm not, or maybe lack of, avoiding those feelings or wanting to feel anything and then
Mhm.
finding yourself addicted, finding yourself trying to fill that void or whatever language you want to use. How much is like environment? How much is it genetic? How much is, and I know this is like the
Ah,
question of all questions.
right. You
I'm
mean
just very fascinated by
personally,
it. Yeah.
personally,
How do you
or
see it?
overall, like all comers?
Yeah. Just, I mean, all kind of what have you learned? Like, I mean, is it a
Yeah,
combination of all these things? I mean, if, somebody's near alcohol, they're just going to be an addict because they're
sure.
predisposed to it, or is it we all have a common proclivity to it?
No, that's a great question. There are probably there are probably some inherited components, just like behaviors are inherited. If you've ever been to a family reunion and met some cousins, and there are little things they do, their little movements, their little particulars, they are yours also, or very similar to yours. Well, that's you probably weren't taught that. So you can see that was my dog barking a second ago. You can see it in dog breeds, the different heritable behaviors,
Mhm.
right? So spaniels act differently than poodles and differently than, right, retrievers. And so there is a genetic component to our tendencies and to the things that we do. However, in the big twin studies where you look at twins that are raised by alcoholic and non-alcoholic parents, twins that are split up and raised in different families. And because they were done in the US, and because the country's so big, there are many examples of this where the two boys or the two girls didn't wind up in the same family. Account for about 50% of the prevalence of substance use disorder, 50% of the prevalence of alcoholism, we'll say. So that means half has nothing to do with genetics. Another way of saying that is flip a coin. So whenever you got a factor that is 50-50, there's no way to say what its contribution is. Meaning half of the people that develop substance use disorder have no family history of it. Half of the people with a family history of it don't develop substance use disorder. So because your mom drank, you can't say it's not. It's as we say, it's not dispositive. It doesn't determine what your outcome is. You can't make a family tree of it like you can with blue eyes, right? Or
Right.
O blood type. So that's part of it. with that said, it's not nothing. There's probably something to it. There's probably something to it because in populations that are exposed to alcohol, just to pick a substance, for a long time, alcoholism tends to be weeded out of the population. So there's there are groups in Eastern Europe that have had alcohol as part of their culture for thousands of years, 6,000 years. The prevalence of alcoholism, alcohol use disorder is much lower in those groups than in Native Americans who've had alcohol in their culture for about 500 years since the Spaniards got here. So, and the reason for that is if you start drinking before reproductive age and you fall off a cliff or fight the wrong buffalo or, drink too much like Alexander the Great and die, you're not going to reproduce. And so the genes, whatever they were, to answer your gene question, whatever they were, don't make it to your descendants. So that's strong evidence that there's something probably genetic involved because alcoholism seems to fade with time. The flip side is, I think most of it has to do with culture. So in societies where alcohol is not available, people don't develop alcoholism or almost never do. So that's 100% environment, right? That's all environment. And for families with kids, and maybe they have a history of substance use disorder in the family, parent, or maybe in themselves, the best thing you can do is to help manage the environment of your kid at home. And the best way you can do that is not drink yourself, if possible, not drink yourself, especially if you've got a history of it. The safest thing to do is, of course, not drink at all. And I keep picking on alcohol, but we can say the same thing about marijuana or other things. And then the next thing is don't permit it in their lives. So I hear to my chagrin, parents sometimes say, well, it's okay if my underage child drinks alcohol in my house because as long as he's home and I know he's safe and he's not driving or with some other kids. That is completely the wrong approach. What you should say is, I expect you to not drink or use drugs until you're at least 21, and then let the adult you decide whether or not you want that to be part of your life. That's your mother and my expectation. And you set that as the standard. The drug use in families that do that, where you have an impermissive attitude toward it, is much, much lower. And I don't know if you remember, you're a pretty young guy, but not that long ago, we made tobacco sales nationwide 21. That's because if kids don't start smoking until they're 21, they're much less likely to become tobacco dependent, but also they are much less likely to become alcohol dependent. So the kids that don't smoke go on to not drink if you can get them to not drink until they're 21. It makes underage drinking fall a lot. So an expectation setting on the part of the parents tells you if that works, and we know it does. And if you look, the alcohol uptake numbers are falling among young people. And part of it's the COVID, and the lockdowns, but part of it is this change in our understanding of this. So that argues for environment, right? That's not genetic at all. That's clearly environmental. So I think it's both. I think we have to look at both. Same as any other illness. If you have a history of diabetes in your family, you have to pay attention. If you have a history of heart disease in your family, you should not smoke. You should get some exercise, right? You should eat right, not be overweight. So I think if you have a genetic load or a genetic predisposition, you maybe should take it a bit more seriously. If you don't, you're not out of the woods. It's not like you can drink as much as you want to just because you don't know anyone in your family that was an alcoholic. You can be a pioneer for sure. But that's a long answer to your question. But does that help?
No, it does. Because I when I'm in my early 20s, I'm in mid 40s now, but I had this very did too much drinking and other things in high school and got very scared of that. And so when I was first married, I just had this fear around alcohol. It was kind of, my mom drank, my grandpa, her brother, I mentioned her brother who became a, counselor and helped a lot of people eventually. But so there's like this kind of subconscious fear, like I don't want to fall down that trap. And so first few years of marriage, I just never would touch it, never had it around, all that kind of stuff. And slowly ease my way into it, but not, I'm still not I still have that thing in the back of my head, right? But that's like anything. I think for me, it's just as you get older, you don't want anything to master you. You don't want anything to get a grip on you, whatever it is. I mean, it could be TV, it could be, chocolate, it could be whatever. So, some of that's learning along the way. But
everybody has something. In California, once I was on a radio show, and it's when recreational marijuana was approved.
Uh-huh.
And so we went from medical when I was in residency. I think they had medical marijuana approved. We all know where that was going, and then finally it went there, and there was recreational marijuana approved, so people didn't have to do this fiction of getting the medical card and all that.
Uh-huh.
And so I was asked on this show about this topic about marijuana, about should people smoke marijuana or use marijuana and cannabis, and I said everyone should smoke weed except the people who shouldn't. So the problem is only you know which one you are, right?
Uh-huh.
Only you know which group you're in. And it's difficult to be honest with yourself, right? Because there's benefits. If you alcohol, the reason it still sticks around is it provides benefits, right? We the ease and comfort, the social lubricant, the
Uh-huh.
camaraderie. It's a tool for reducing inhibitions and for facilitating rapid entry into relaxed state. So it's an amazing tool in that regard. And that's probably why, I mean, do you know about the elephants that will knock the fruit down off of the tree, but they won't eat it right away? They'll wait until it rots and gets alcohol in it, and then they'll eat it.
Oh, interesting.
It's elephants. So, and there's numerous examples of from the animal kingdom. The dolphins will swim in the red tide and get, wacky from that. And there's even ants that will eat this nectar out of a certain flower that makes them
Yeah,
intoxicated.
I heard about it. There's like some birds too that eat certain berries and they get
Birds will eat pyracantha berries until they can't fly, and they get
right.
eaten by cats and run over by trucks. But the atropine that's in the pyracantha berries makes them feel intoxicated. And so it's not even human beings that have the market cornered on pursuing substances to change the way they feel. It's not just human, and it's not a question of failing or willpower or, you're a bad person or a sinner. It's biology.
Uh-huh.
So biologically, it makes sense why we should have created something that it tastes delicious and helps you relax after work, and maybe reduces conflict. That's pretty valuable in integrated society, right? And now that looks like have a beer at the Charger game. That's what that looks like. But along the way, the peace pipe and then the shamanic rituals and all the rest of that stuff, we use these substances in order to facilitate, I think, human interaction and contact. But anything can be taken too far. I mean, calories we need to survive, but if you take in too many calories, they will kill you. So I think anything can become something that's bad for you, taken to extreme, for sure.
So let's continue to pull this thread a little bit. I'm thinking about, somebody comes to you, they come to your program. I mean, obviously you don't know up front, is this genetic? Is this, environment? I mean, you obviously have a process to kind of, you probably unveil some of these things and help them help you understand who they are and why they're going to alcohol or drugs or what have you. Uh, but what would you say, like in your program, what are the kind of the common features that are really, that you've discovered that are really helpful for everybody? Because it sounds like you're trying to do a kind of a holistic kind of help with people. It's not, obviously not, probably not just one way to do it, but what have you found kind of in your learning over these last 2 decades of like, what are the common features that are most helpful to help someone that's struggling with alcohol or
Sure. So, yeah, that's a great question. Break it down, right? So the most important thing is to show up. That's the most important thing. So the substances, one of the things I like to say is that they allow you to be in 2 places at one time. So let's say you're not getting along with your wife and there's friction. Who knows why? You may have something to do with it. That doesn't matter. But whatever's going on, there's some tension, right? Let's say you have kids. You're not going to leave because you don't want that to devastate the family. And maybe this is transient, maybe it's temporary and it'll blow over. So you can't leave. But every day coming home from work and having the same fight and the same argument and the same, irritability and all the rest of that stuff, you can't keep doing that. And so people will have a beer or 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 after work. And then they're geographically at home, right? Their GPS would say they're at home, but they're a million miles away. Their minds are not there. So substances are a handy tool that often turns on the user to be in 2 places at one time. So if you're going to leave that behind, if you identified that you're missing in action too much, right? Your mind is now not your own. Your automatic habit to try and manage these feelings of, because when you do that, if you drink instead of have the conversation, right? If you drink instead of do the thing that is, scary and irritating, and that's why your wife is after you. If you do that, then you'll solve the problem. And maybe it's admitting that you made a mistake, and maybe it's fixing something that you really would rather not deal with because it's embarrassing or will take up your time or something that you have to do now to deal with. So if you don't do that, then not only are you drinking, which takes you out of the game, but whatever the thing is, I don't know, fix a leak in the roof. You don't have to fix a leak in the roof when it's not raining.
Uh-huh.
And so it's something that can be, and I'm making this up as we go, but we can push off that thing for later, but it gets worse. The hole gets bigger, or when the rain comes, it's really bad. So showing up, it means being present in your own life in real time. And that's very uncomfortable when you first start doing that, because people are mad. A common reaction is they want to make sure that you're okay. You're not dead. And then they let you have it, right? All the stuff that they're pissed off about, all the stuff that they were scared of, all the things that they were upset about, all the times you didn't listen, often avalanche that on you. And that can feel overwhelming at first, especially without a drink. But if you stay and take it, if you will, if you stay and listen through the upset to the heart that this person cares about me and she was afraid in this scenario that I was going to die or leave. If you stay put, if you show up and remain present, that changes everything. So sooner or later, the person who's upset with you for acting like an alcoholic, that person will see, well, wait a minute, I'm pretty mad at Ryan, but he's not running away. Usually at this point, he always escapes into a can of Budweiser or whatever, and he's not doing that. He's here. He's still listening. That changes everything. If you will stay and face the music, as they say. That's number one. Show up.
Uh-huh.
Number two is ask for help. Because one thing we can probably all agree on is that you're out of good ideas at this point, right? As they say in recovery, your best thinking got you here. So you're okay. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come home from work. I'm going to have a beer. I'm not going to let it get out of hand. All right. All that scheming, all that sort of management strategy, that's the problem. And so asking for help puts a person in a position of humility and able to receive new information, new guidance, the truth, right? Asking for help. And it also takes you out of the gutter, because asking for help means your value of yourself is that you're worthy to receive help. I mean, how often somebody, well, I don't want to bother him because, he's probably busy and I don't want to, right? Or I don't want to tell her what I need in the relationship because then she's going to ask for me something that I can't provide, or we'll go back into the same way. So people don't have the courage to be humble. When you say help, right? What does it say? Ask and ye shall receive. So asking for help is number two. And then the third thing is go outside. So go outside of your thinking, go outside literally into the outside of what is, because we build these little prisons of routine. And sometimes they look remarkably similar, right? There's this show on TV called Severance. Have you seen that show? Severance. So every morning they get the elevator opens and they're back at work, and it's the same. It's very Groundhog Day, the stuff that they're going through. The show's a great show. My kids have me watching it. But the repetition and the heavy weight of the monotonous, dreary, trapped in this habit. We drink because we know what the feeling we're going to get is. And there's a learned loop of, if I drink, I get to feel better. And so I know what to do. That world gets very small. And so going outside, what do they say? The kids say, touch grass. So go outside, experience nature, look up at the sky, think about the sun. You're not in charge of the sun. Maybe that's the beginning of awareness that your world is not entirely run by you. Appreciate that life grows. Appreciate that life has seasons, and not so much in Los Angeles, where they have traffic, tourists, earthquake, and fire. I think those are the seasons in California. But you've got or LA. You've got to look outside of your routine. You've got to look outside of yourself for help. And those are 3 steps: show up, ask for help, go outside.
I think this is interesting because it's this bodily part of, we often just think of thinking, I should say, mind, soul, but the body of, I know with my mother, at least alcoholics I've known, that there's kind of an isolation reality to them. Like there is no sense of time. There is no sense of today, tomorrow. Everything's just about here and now and drinking but also just very like, you're ashamed. So you're doing this in, at least in my mom's case, doing it in private or doing it alone, or you're not going for walks. You're not, you're just very cut off from other people. And my question, kind of interesting, we both live in the LA area, is in a very hyper individualized Western world, what's the place of community and just this hyper kind of pull up my bootstraps kind of thinking, and I can figure this out and I can do it myself. Because in other cultures, it seems like, the church I'm a part of, the very multicultural church. And it's interesting because other cultures, other than, me being a white man, but like African American, Asian, Hispanic, they have this sense of family that's just kind of built in where we tended to be a little more kind of individualized. Like sometimes even like addiction, like you wouldn't get away with it because you're so much more tight with your family, with your community, you know? So I just wonder, like, how's this feeding the amount of addiction we see in our culture just by this kind of isolated, individualized, is that even a factor? Or am I just making that up?
No, I think that's key. I mean, Johann Hari says that the antidote to addiction is community,
Uh,
and I think that's true. I agree. There's a references this study that was done a number of years ago in Canada with rats, and they addicted the rats to heroin by putting it in their food, and so there's nothing else for them to, or in their water. There's nothing else for them to eat, and they drank this stuff, and then the molecules of heroin had their effects on the rats, and the rats are aware creatures, and they would continue to use the heroin in order to deal with their feelings. But then this guy up in Canada, instead of putting the rats in these isolated cages, you have these tiny little rat cages, which are great for science experiments in terms of moving them around because they're easy to clean and they're easy to stack and so forth. But they're not at all how rats live. Rats live with other rats. So he put these rats in what he called Rat Park. And Rat Park was very different than the cages. So they couldn't get out of Rat Park, but inside of Rat Park, they had places to frolic, they had places to hide, they had places where rats had other rats and they could pair off and mess around and do their ratty business in the bushes. They had community that's roughly the size of a rat community, and they put out the same heroin water, and none of the rats would drink the heroin water if they could drink anything else.
uh,
They just wouldn't choose it. So then they said, well, maybe that works to maybe community keeps people from getting, or it keeps rats from getting addicted, but maybe it doesn't fix them. So then they took these rats, other rats, and they got them dependent on morphine, or heroin rather, and they put them back in the rat park. So these are drug addicted rats back in the rat park, and they said, okay, and then they put out a bowl of the heroin containing water that had sugar in it to make it even extra good. Rats would not drink the heroin water. They went through detox. Heroin detox is not dangerous to a rat. They feel bad. They were nurtured and cared for and brought food by their other rats. And in a few days, they got past it. Cold cold rat, I guess. They got past it and they rejoined the community.
uh,
So that is it. That, rats are not the same as people, but they're our cousins and our little furry cousins. So what that says is probably getting into community will help people not just prevent substance use disorder. We know that that's true. Tight community.
uh,
We know that the church is the most effective treatment we have for substance use disorder on a numbers basis. The Celebrate Recovery programs that are in a lot of churches,
yeah,
and then their own versions of it in
yeah.
yeah in
I
in
just went to one recently
yeah. So you
with
know
some
what I mean.
friends, yeah, from church, yeah.
Very similar to AA, because AA is very similar to church. That's where it came from Buckman and all those guys back in the early 20th century.
Yeah, yeah.
So because the truth is the truth, and getting connected. So probably it's curative, or at least ameliorative, healing. It probably helps, and it's the basis of recovery. We don't recover alone. The first word in the 12 steps is we. So I think you're right over the target with that. I think connectedness and community, and soldiers don't fight for themselves; they fight for their buddies in the platoon.
Uh-huh.
We we don't help others in recovery for ourselves. We help them for them, and we get helped along the way. So, and that's probably why I do what I do, because now, I guess in one sense, I never left rehab.
Uh-huh.
I'm still there. I'm the doctor. And so I get to work with many people who are going through this process in the early stage. But so many of the people in the treatment centers are in recovery themselves, and people on my staff. So we'll have mini meetings throughout the day, tagging up, checking in,
Uh-huh.
touching grass, so to speak, because sometimes it's with the way life is in the world, it's easy to get isolated, right? We can get isolated on I remember a pal of mine, when TikTok came out, he was super excited about it. We were in a group meeting of all these dudes. We're in this meeting, Zoom meeting. And he was super excited about how amazing it was. And he said it's like it has everything you need. It's like it's terrific how it just gives you exactly what you're looking for. And he held up his phone and he's scrolling it on the camera. And it's boats and roping and something else. Boats, roping, and fine cuisine. And he's like, this is just great. There's pictures of girls in here. It's just that's TikTok's amazing. And the guys are like, that's your algorithm. Your algorithm is that stuff because that's what you want and that's what you click on and that's what you like. And so these things that feel like custom fits, all the social media stuff, it's it's a computer program figuring out, oh, you spent 18 seconds looking at this and you only spent 4 seconds looking at that. So we're going to send you more of these things like this. And so those kind of self-reinforcing isolation stuff feels familiar and listen, these companies, these social media companies, they have guys like me working there trying to figure out how to make their products more sticky and more attractive and make the sound that gets you to, answer the message and get engaged. So I think there's a danger in a lot of these things. I think this stuff, just like alcohol, just like scissors can be used for good or ill. I do think you have to pay attention to where we brought that all the way back around, didn't we? We have to pay attention to where you're spending your time.
Yeah.
Because it can pull you in for sure and isolate you from. We have a rule: there's no phones at the table, right? So when we have dinner, there's no phones because whatever it is can wait. Certainly, 45 minutes while you're having dinner with the family.
Yeah. Well, and it's like we are the algorithm. I mean, that's what people don't want to acknowledge. It's not the algorithm's not the problem. It's giving you what you are, what you want, what it's not.
You're the
It's not
product.
reading your brain. Yeah, and we talk about our kids. I have 4 kids, and different teenagers and some younger ones, and with the phones, and it's one of the things we said. It's like, hey, it's not the technology. It's just we have limits, and we have to create discipline in our own lives to turn it off, to fast, to say, hey, we're not going to look at them around the table or take breaks, or the phone's not making you do that. We're reaching for it. We can't handle boredom. We can't handle, but going back to just the community question, the one thing I was just thinking about was not even in terms of like, is community the answer, but my concern is when I read, Bowling Alone many years ago, this shift in culture that we're just becoming as a culture more isolated, which is leading to more addiction because we're not volunteering. We're not involved in our neighborhoods. We're not involved in our churches like we once were. So we're trying to we've created this pseudo community, like you said, like with social media and with other things where we don't have to interact with anybody and we can just kind of live these quiet, isolated lives. Study after study saying like actually happiness is built around community. Like you can't be fully happy without community of some sort, some kind, right?
Not just happiness, but longevity. So take it out of
the
the blue zones. What they have in common is not the olive oil or the Mediterranean diet.
Right.
It's community.
Yeah.
They spend time together.
It's like cheers. Everybody knows your name.
Everybody knows your name. Yeah. It's not the bar. It's the people in the bar. Yeah. I think that's super important. The mega churches that are successful, right? You get to tens of thousands of church members. You can't possibly know another, 8,999 people. What holds them together is affinity groups within that church. They're the ladies who like to, do needlepoint. And there are others who like to throw axes. And so there's a group of 6 or 8 or 10 ladies that do their respective things, right? There's some guys that like to do triathlons and some guys like to do bowling or have fantasy football. And so there's a topical interest group that gets them together. But then while you're bowling, I'm talking about John 3:16 or whatever, there's a chance to have these support and being challenged on whatever nonsense idea you have. There's community, right? There's a chance to be part of something. And we know that's an antidote for substance use disorder. It's an antidote for burnout. People stay married when they're in communities that are supportive. People don't commit suicide when they've got somebody to talk to. It's critical that these things are established. And you're probably right. We are alienating ourselves with this, right? With the pornography instead of relationships, and with the, being mad on the internet instead of actually having to have a conversation with somebody who may not see things exactly like you do, but you can still be friends and still have coffee. There's Alcohol use disorder is declining a bit, but I think it's been replaced with marijuana. Also, people aren't going out to drink. They're drinking at home, so they're drinking less, which is good, but they're not going out, which is bad. And some of that has to do with the economy. It's expensive
Yeah.
to to go out in a way that it wasn't when we were kids. Yeah, it's many things. We don't get our news from watching the 6 o'clock news anymore. Everyone has their own news feed that's tuned in for their specific interests. Some
Mhm.
stuff, major things happening you might not even know about,
Mhm.
or maybe only major things you know about and not what's happening in your neighborhood, just depending on where your level of focus is.
Mhm.
And yet, even television shows. When I was a kid, if a show didn't pull so many millions of viewers, it would get canceled.
Mhm.
Now you can have a YouTube channel that has. I mean, if you have a YouTube channel with 1,000 regular viewers, that's going to stay on. People will keep producing content, and maybe it grows to 10,000. But 10,000 viewers for a show in the time when I grew up, that would have flawed. They wouldn't You wouldn't get a second episode
Yeah.
because this has got to go nationwide on Channel 4, and it's not.
Yep.
There's no way. So you can have these. It's double edged. You can have tailored specific messages, but then you just listen to your own people. You get what they call an echo chamber, and
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's
um,
interesting because, even the communal element of when you had 70 million people watching, Cheers or
or
Cosby
MASH,
Show or whatever, you go to work the next day or go to school and you'd all talk about it. So there's
of
like this
course.
communal connection because there's only 6 channels and everybody, they have so many options, right? So it kind of bring you together, like you feel like you're connected and like, oh, hey, what happened? Oh, so cool, all that. But yeah, we've lost that because how many times have you talked to a friend? They're like, I watched this sci-fi show on this streaming platform and I've never heard of the sci-fi show or the streaming platform. Probably 4,000 people watch it and yet they're really into it.
And even the actors, who's in it? Oh, this guy,
Right.
this guy. Who's that? Oh, he was in this and that show. Other shows you haven't heard of,
Right.
and that, of course, would never have happened before. These
Yep.
astronauts were just rescued last week from floating in space for most of a year.
Yeah.
And, I didn't see all that much about that.
No,
No,
barely
what
made
was
the news.
going on? It was, oh yeah, these astronauts, they came back.
Yep.
Oh my goodness, that would have been that would have run for a week,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yep.
Their kids, and they would have been talking about the guy who, I don't know, had to clean out the module. I don't know. There would have been a whole bunch of stuff in there, and we would have heard about that. But it was just like, oh yeah, they're recuperating. Okay, on to the next thing.
Nice. Now you're
And
like, what?
there's so
Yeah.
much. It's all now. It's not that. That's not that when I was younger. Sound like an old man. It's not like when I was younger there wasn't things happening. Somebody else was doing the filtering. Right? Somebody else was saying, "Well, look, this sheep got out of the pen in Scotland, and we're not going to cover that story. It's just not. It's not that interesting. We're covering the astronauts landed on the moon story, or we're covering the whatever." But now you can select, like there's a thing in Google News, it defaults to For You, which is just another algorithm. And if you ever look at anything, it's just keeps showing it. Like, I don't want to buy another tennis racket. Tennis rackets. I have a tennis racket. I don't
Oh,
need sending me articles about tennis rackets.
believe me, my wife and I, buying gifts for the kids, and it's like you're researching stuff, and then every Instagram feed, every Google search, it's like looking
Yeah.
for Legos or it's like, whatever the thing is. Yeah, it's popping up
Right.
everywhere.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, doctor, this has been fantastic. And just as we kind of get to the end of our conversation, I'd love to hear just, as you kind of think about someone coming to you and needing help, what would just be some wise kind of steps? I mean, people are obviously listening to the show. We have friends, family, loved ones that struggle with addiction of various kinds. So, kind of the first question would just be that, someone in that spot, what can they do? What would be wise? And then also just kind of like talk about how they could get connected with you and where's a way they can find you and
Yeah. So
they need that kind of help.
say this: if you've reached the point where you're considering whether or not you've got a problem, you likely have a problem. You likely do. It's worth exploration. It's not guaranteed. One of the best things you can do is try to stop, and that will help answer your question.
Um,
So it's not New Year's. A lot of people quit for New Year's. If you're quitting in March or April, and see how it goes, right? So see how it goes. 30 days is a pretty good, reasonable start. If you like those results, if your life gets a little better, if you're feeling more refreshed in the morning, if you're able to concentrate, if you don't feel so bad, don't look so bad, try it for a year. See how that goes. If your life gets worse in that year, and when I say substances, I mean, all substances. If your life gets worse in the year, that's a different problem. But usually what happens is people, they feel better. And it just as a practical matter, if you feel worse when you're drinking and you feel better when you're not, you don't have to make this the Gordian knot. It doesn't have to be any more complicated than, oh, I used to drink and now I don't because I feel better when I don't. It can be that simple. If you try to stop and find that you can, if you say, well, I'm going to stop for 30 days, and then on day 6 or day 4 or the afternoon of day 1, you find yourself making up a story about why it's okay to have just one because you're at your whatever, or this is a thing, or it's a business deal, or whatever the story is. I think about the example of somebody who's allergic to strawberries, right? If they got a big rash and had trouble breathing and maybe had to go to the hospital to get a shot for their strawberry allergy, they would not be saying, well, can I have some strawberry jam? I really like strawberry jam. Like, are there strawberries in strawberry jam? Well, yeah, you can see the seeds in there. I can see the strawberries. And okay, well, you're allergic to strawberries, so you shouldn't have strawberry jam. Okay, all right. But what about strawberry ice cream? I really like strawberry, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't be negotiating to have something that's bad for you. But people do that with alcohol all the time. So if you find yourself in that group of, I want to stop but can't seem to, that's actually good news because there's hope for you. So no one has to continue drinking, even if you want to. It depends on how difficult it is to stop. So some people need to check into a treatment center to get medical help to help stabilize their bodies and help transition off alcohol. That's what we do for our patients. But some people are able to go through it without medical help. They feel crummy for a couple of days and hungover and get through it. Others need more involved help depending on what it is. If you're on sedative pills like benzodiazepines, Valium, and that sort of thing, Ativan, Klonopin, Xanax, those are really can be very dangerous if you stop by themselves. The big dangerous ones are alcohol and those sedative pills. Opiates are unpleasant, but not so much dangerous. Most people struggle with those. But if you reach the point where you recognize, I can't do this on my own, ask for help. So there are treatment centers near you because now they're everywhere in America. They used to be. They were concentrated in California and a little bit on the East Coast, but now every state has treatment centers. It's required by your insurance to cover them. If you don't have insurance, there's other ways to do that. There's other state and federal sponsored insurance programs, and programs even have scholarships and fee waivers and stuff like that. So don't let finances keep you from getting some help for the medical portion of things. And then afterwards, it's a recognition that the drinking or whatever your drugs you're using, they're a solution for how you feel. The alcohol is its own problem by the time people come in for help. But the real problem is not the alcohol. Once the alcohol goes away, if you felt better, that's why I said, if your life gets worse when you're not drinking, there's some other issues. It's not, if I didn't drink, my life would be great. It's if I don't drink, I'm left with myself and how I feel. So what people need is a different way of living. That's what they need, is a different way of living. And it has to do with actions and has to do with attitude. And those things practiced over time can give you a completely different life. One approach is the 12 steps. Another approach is celebrate recovery. Another approach is smart recovery. Another approach is the Buddhist approach. But it has to be something that is bigger than you and something that involves other people that you can connect with. And then many people have mental health issues besides. So there's, a substantial percentage of people have these things also. If that's true for your listeners and they don't address those things also, so if you have a bipolar patient who won't take medicine, won't manage those symptoms, then they won't stay sober because they'll grab a drink again or they'll grab a stimulant again.
Yeah, that's a little bit of my mom's story about bipolar and drinking.
You got to treat both. You got to treat both.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Jason, this has been fantastic. And thank you for helping a lot of people today. Thank you for sharing your story. I know this will resonate with many of our community and a broader community just because we're all connected to this in different ways. Where's like a good place to find you directly?
I'm just getting into this space, but you can find me on Instagram or on X, Dr. Jason Giles, Dr. Jason Giles. I'm on all those.
Great. It's on the show notes.
Yeah. If you look for our treatment centers, Ryan, the medical director, you'll find me in there also.
Great. Yeah. Look that up and it looks fantastic. So thank you so much for coming on the show and you have a great day.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it.